Welcome, listening family. Akwaba, Uhuru Safsa, Hotep. I'm welcoming you into the space now, and the space that you find yourself in is the Foundational Friday segment on enlightenment and transformation. As always, I am your conductor on this journey, Yuya, Assaaan-ANU, and delighted as all times and every time, even when there is no time, to bring this information to you, to bring this experience to you, and to share in this learning and educational experience. In this session, we're dealing with the energy and the concept more so of the Indigo Child. The Indigo Child. And the stimulus for actually recording this segment came in the form of various color of questions that I was being confronted with, I'd say over the past year, the various clients I worked with, just different places I was doing workshops, and because I work with young people a lot, and I also teach classes, spirituality, to young people as well, in metaphysics, and some are actually in our new spiritual training now, which is wonderful. So one of the questions that I kept being confronted with was if I knew anything about this term, the Indigo Child, or what this idea of the Indigo Child was, and how one could identify their child as being an Indigo Child. So, initially, I got a couple questions about it. I answered them and I didn't really think much of it, though I was familiar with the movement, we'll say, and the movement within the concept. But then the more it began to approach, I started to see some unfairness in the terminology, and maybe even some unfairness in the diagnosis of who or what makes up an Indigo Child. So I figured, it'd be a wonderful opportunity to speak about it through this portal. Also, because I often tell students that, it's not very impressive what I do. To me, it's not impressive. And some people, they find it very interesting because, they haven't really maybe been faced with something like what I do, or have never really been in the presence or seen a indigenous priest work. So, it's something new, and it's intriguing to them. But I always tell them that this is not really impressive for a grown man to do. What's impressive is when you see children do this form of work. When you see them stepping into their character and their power early on, as opposed to so many of us in our adult lives who fell into our consciousness. Now, of course, we know that everything is divinely orchestrated, and we should, as always, be thankful and grateful for that. But in the same instance, sometimes we could have gotten on that path or that train track a little earlier, but was distracted or maybe fearful, or felt we knew something and had something that we really didn't. And through a series of divine coincidences and events, we are led to the path that we're on now. So this is beautiful. It's wonderful. It's something to rejoice. The redemption of the lost soul is always something miraculous, but it's so much more amazing when it's done intentionally, when you have a young person and they are guided, nurtured, and their spiritual genius and their spiritual psychology is cultivated, as opposed to being thwarted, hindered, and perverted. And then later on in life, they have to do the deprogramming on their own, or hopefully if they're fortunate enough to find themselves in a spiritual community, they may have a little bit of help. So that's why I wanted to speak on the Indigo Child piece, and especially for those of you out there with children, or for those of you out there in contact with any children. And if you're not in contact with children and you have something to offer them, I suggest you do that. That's very important that we maintain and create a better existence and reality for those who come behind us, as our ancestors did for us. So our first primary essential should always be our children, after our own life purpose. But right after that, you have to deal with these babies. You have to teach and nurture, and most of all, love these children. And you can't educate a child that you do not love. You cannot educate a person that you do not love. Okay, that exchange has to happen on some level. There's various levels and depths of love. But that has to be present. If not, then you're really just teaching and training, which is something different. Okay, teaching and training can remove the indigo awareness from a child. So let's first tap into the idea of the indigo child, or the indigo children, and really where this concept, or more so this name, came from. Well, we have in the 1970s, there was a parapsychologist by the name of Nancy Ann Tappe. Nancy Ann Tappe. Last name is spelled Tappe, for anyone who wants to look her up. And she's since transitioned, but she came up with these theories. It was a series of books, actually, about this color awareness and really healing through color and powers through colors. And it wasn't until really about maybe 20 years later, in the 90s, where there was this reemergence of this concept of the indigo child and what this means and what it represents. And first, I'll tell you that the indigo child is marked by certain psychic attunements and abilities, but it's been purported that the color indigo is specified because there's an indigo type aura around these type of children. For those of you who are familiar with auras, that is the energetic field that surrounds the body. Okay, in our Yoruba tradition, we call that the Ojiji. Sometimes you hear people refer to the shadow self as the Ojiji, but that's incorrect. The Ojiji is electromagnetic field that surrounds the body. Okay, and here, as well as many other places, it's called the aura, which is an energy field, and you can project your energy field out, wider or longer with greater distance, based on the spiritual work that you do. So the more ashe you have, or the more chi, or the more emi exercises, which is divine breath, the greater and stronger your aura will become. So the indigo child has this radiation of blue in their aura. And those who have the ability to see auras, this is said to be the color that they have seen around them when they began to emerge more in the 90s. So they received the name the indigo children. Okay, so let's deal with the color indigo for a moment before we deal with the concept a little bit more. Indigo children are children who are marked by having a deep sense of belonging to not only the planet, but divine purposes to be acted out on the planet. Indigo children are mainly marked by their psychic and intuitive abilities at a very young age. These are the type of children who come through and know certain things or know the family story. They'll tell you things about your father, your grandfather, so forth and so on at very young ages that, of course, information they wouldn't necessarily have access to. You'll also find stories with indigo children where they were very conscious of things going on while they were in the womb, right? Some have the ability to channel. So you'll find that a lot of indigo children are artists, and not just visual artists, but also music artists and, different forms of art. Instrumentalist. One thing that's always noticed is that when an indigo child is asked for where their talent came from or where their ideas or just their creativity, they just really speak more from an Aquarian place, whereas I know. I just know I've always known this is just what it is. So they deal with life and humanity in a very matter-of-fact type of way. Okay, there's not a whole lot of thinking that goes on with indigo children, but there's a whole lot of knowing. Now, we know that this marks the age of the Aquarius. The Aquarius in our Yoruba is Shango. Okay, we left the Piscean age, which was the age of belief. That is the age of religion. Okay, in the Piscean age, we're dealing with not only Yemoja, but we're also dealing with Obatala in another form as well. But the Piscean representing Yemoja, again, the fish, or the Vesica Pisces, or the Vesica Pisces, which represents the womb. Okay, so we have here this concept of the indigo child, the child who comes forth into the world with a direct, core-rooted knowing of not only what they're here to do, and they begin that at a very early age, but also how the world works. Okay. And because now we have this classification of indigo child, some of these type of children get to slip through the cracks and out of the net of medical diagnosis, such as ADD or ADHD or autism. These things that were put initially and previously, and still are, on some children who will be classified as indigo children. Clearly, if we're talking about children who are highly intuitive and are tapping into a greater resource and pool of information, these are children who somewhat live between two different worlds. And as children, sometimes we don't have filters to know when to begin or to cease a dialogue with an entity in another world. So some children will have what's called make-believe friends or invisible friends, right? And then when they get older, if they still have that, then they're actually called neurotic. They're insane at that point, and they have to be medicated because they are seeing entities and conversing with entities from another place. And sometimes when they're still doing that at an older age, they lose the ability to distinguish between dimensions. Okay, so that's an adult indigo child. Sometimes, not all the times. I'm not putting that on indigo children per se, but I'm giving you some of the things that are misdiagnosed when we're dealing with indigo children. Now, what you'll note here is that with the indigo child, the focus is on psychic ability mainly, their ability to channel. They're basically channelers. You'll also note that if you do any research on indigo children, and I implore you to do so, please do. There's only so much I can cover in the amount of time that I allot to teach these things. But you will see children who don't look very indigo. You'll see children who really exhibit a shade or hue on the opposite side of the spectrum, which is very different than when you look at, let's say, the movie The Matrix. Very interesting movie, right? When you went into the apartment of the Oracle, who was clearly Yemoja. Okay, you go into the apartment of the Oracle, and she's smoking that cigarette, which really was supposed to be a cigar, but they had to make it a cigarette. If she had the cigar in her mouth, you would have known, okay, this is some Orisha stuff here. This is Yemoja. But she's in a project apartment. If you remember, when Neo went to go visit the Oracle, they weren't in any school that looked like the X-Men Academy or school for gifted children. They were in a apartment with cinder block walls with a drunk blind man in the hallway, which obviously represents the search for knowledge, the blind man in the hallway. And then they go into the apartment, and she's making cookies for the children, and the children are in this project, well, dare I say, even urban building, and they have this melanated woman in there making cookies, and the children are from all over the world. If you notice, there are many melanated children there, children who looked physically closer to indigo, or like we sometimes like to say, blue-black. Okay, they were a little closer to that. So it was very interesting when you look at that. So sometimes people can be excluded from certain groups when you start doing research. And one of my jobs, and one of the things that I even enjoy doing, is highlighting the global presence of everyone in every place. So I don't think that melanin children should be excluded from the pool of indigo children, especially, although for those of you who will begin to study this and follow up, you won't really find too much information, or at least classifications of indigo children that are melanated. But like in the Anu spiritual group recently, I posted the video of Ben Underwood, the young man who has this amazing echo reflection ability. He's sightless, well, physically. And he has some amazing tools that he uses with his body, his sound, his tongue. And he sees almost just as well as you and I who are sighted. Okay, this is clearly an indigo child. And interesting enough, as I said before, his mother's name is Aquanetta Underwood. Aquanetta. okay? And I told everyone she's Yemoja, which I saw before I even knew her name. It was all over her. So how is this relevant, and how does this tie into the Indigo Child phenomenon, right? Okay, well, indigo, as you all know, of course, is a deep blue color. The indigo color. It's a deep blue, and good example. You want to check out indigo, and at the same time check out an excellent movie. Watch the movie Daughters of the Dust. Wonderful, wonderful movie. I probably watch Daughters of the Dust once a month. I just love the visuals and just the energy, and you'll see that indigo and the history of that indigo dyeing, which got its name from India, all right, which was Indus or Indus, which was, of course, the Indus or Indus River. So at its core or root, the word indigo actually means river. Indigo means river. Some of you are already starting to catch on to where we're going with this. I know you are. Okay, so we have, again, I referenced the Matrix earlier, and I was speaking about the Oracle, and I certainly told you who the Oracle is. Our dear Yeye Omo Eja, which is Yeye is mother, Omo is child, Eja is fish. Okay, Yeye Omo Eja, mother of all the fishes. Okay, whose children are fishers, mothers whose children are fishers. We're all fishes, though, aren't we? Aren't we all fish? Not fishes. Excuse me for the grammatical faux pas. But we are all fish because at some point we all swam in amniotic fluid, right? That salt water in the womb where we developed and we were fashioned by Obatala and nurtured by Yemoja, right? The creation story all over again. So what's interesting here is that, again, you have indigo, which is a dark blue color, right? And this is where we got our first form of indigo dyeing, which is very popular. At one point, the region known as India, or Indus Kush, which is really a better way to put that, was known. And that's all, the main thing we're known for the indigo that could be gathered and captured from that country. For that region. And the color indigo itself represents intuition, psychic awareness, loyalty, devotion, the ability to see under the mundane reality. So again, we're dealing with channeling, psychic ability, divination. These are all properties of the color indigo. Indigo is even a color that's used to awaken the first eye. For those of you who may refer to that as the third eye or the pineal, for that indigo is used. Okay, you'll find sometimes even people will use indigo on their first eye physically on their forehead. They'll put the dot on using indigo. Okay, this is all Yeye Omo Eja energy, or Yemonya for some, Imoja for some, Yemoja for others. Okay, so this is the energy that we're dealing with when we're dealing with these indigo children. So now essentially, who is not a child of the water? Who is not a child of the womb? Anyone who is a child of the womb is technically an indigo child. So sometimes what you'll find with these new age movements is that they'll notice something or a trend that's happening with a collective, a group of people, a collective group of people. And in order not to maybe even inspire or encourage that group of people, what they'll do is they'll speak about it in terms of isolated incidents. Oh, here's an indigo child. There's an indigo child. There's an example of somebody's DNA evolving, which is what we're talking about when we're talking about indigo children. What you'll notice is when you start looking at them, they even look different. When I look at my daughter, one of the things I used to always joke about with her is that she has this stare that when she looks at you, like when I used to teach her in homeschooling, she would stare at me almost as if she's not paying, almost as if she was bored. No blinking. Her mouth would be open. I always say, close your mouth or a fly goes in your mouth. And she'd close her mouth but still sit there staring at me. But at the end of the lesson, would always, every single time, be able to break down the lesson better than every other child in the space. And it used to be, it was like the running joke. Like, it looks like she's sitting there just dazed out with a glazed look over it. But that's one of the characteristics of indigo children, is that they have they're intense observers. Okay, they'll stare at you and pretty much stare through you, because they're not really looking with their physical eyes per se. They're sciencing up and reading the whole energy of what you're coming with. Okay, so these are things that we can tap into even as adults by tapping into the energy of Yemoja. Very important. One of the things that you'll see, I'm going to give you a little side note, but it's on point where we're going. You look at the series, whether it's cartoon or the television series of Wonder Woman, okay? Wonder Woman. And if you look at her, I don't want to say panties, that's what I used to call it when I was a child, but her bottom shorts, we'll give them the benefit of the doubt. The shorts she wore, they were dark blue with stars all over them. Now, we of course know, those of us who are in tune with our Kemetic studies, that represented the archetype Nut, okay, also known as Net, sometimes spelled NT, NWT, and UT. Okay, very similar to internet or the net or the night sky, which held all the stars in it, right? That night sky holding the stars in it is very important in what we're dealing with here. It's also important to note that when we're dealing with the concept of Nut, or even net, as I was speaking about earlier, we also have, when we're dealing with Nut, it not only means the night sky, but obviously we're also dealing with that water energy. Indigo meaning river. Now, we also have the word Nun, which is N-U-N in Hebrew, which would be Nun Vav Nun, okay, N-U-N. And Nun actually means fish, or in its earlier senses, it means water. So when you have in the Bible, the Old Testament, you have Joshua, and it was said that Joshua, or better yet, Yahshua, was a son of Nun. Well, what does that mean? Yahshua was a son of the water, and Yahshua we know is actually the name of the Christ, because his name was not Jesus, his name was Yahshua, okay? But we're talking about the Old Testament Yahshua. But it's just very interesting that he would be a son of Nun, and we're speaking about now, and a sun is also considered like a star, right? So the stars in the night sky are stars of Nun, or that night sky, that darkness, that indigo can represent either night sky or represent water. The fish that are in the water can either represent your light, your brilliance as a sun, a shining sun. Again, we're dealing with the pineal here when we're dealing with the concept of the idea of a sun. Okay, so it's very important when we look at these different words and we see the correlations, and we also get to see the schemes and the strategies that go on to convince us that we're not very special, and only a few exist in the world who are exhibiting certain types of talents and abilities. So untrue. No, anyone who was born of water, and not all are born of water. Not all come to the planet with a soul. But anyone who was born of water is a child of Nun, or is a son of Nun, or in other instances is an indigo child again. So Nun, again, in its Aramaic translation, which we know was the language that the Bible was translated from into the Hebrew to the Greek to the English. We have Nun, which actually means fish. Okay, so it's very important. Again, we're coming back to that Yemoja energy, or again, Yeye Omo Eja, mother, child, fish. Okay, Yeye Omo Eja. So of course, the only place that blue and white, or that blue with the white stars on this Wonder Woman's outfit could go would be around her womb. It would be her shorts, quote unquote. And what does this signify? Of course, the things that are birthed from that triple stage darkness, or that indigo, or Yemoja's sacred waters. Okay, these are the things that are birthed from there, and it's a very powerful thing. Of course, we're dealing here with the energy of manifestation and instantaneous reality reconstruction. Of course, and aside from that, what we're also dealing with is the redemption of this mother concept. When we're dealing with the science of Wonder Woman, and for those of us who have studied the science and looked at Wonder Woman, we know that her imagery all comes from Kemetic ideology, Kemetic pantheonism, and the Kemetic symbolism, right? But we saw no one who looked Kemetic in the series Wonder Woman, whether it be the cartoon or whether it be the shows that came out in the 70s, despite the fact that Wonder Woman was said to have been, who grew up and was an Amazon herself, but didn't look very Amazonian. Okay, so now we have a redemption in 2013 from an Indigo Child, who now redeems the Wonder Woman in the name of a young producer some of you may be aware of. She's 16 years old, out of Canada, and her name is Wonder Gal. Wonder Gal. Her birth name is Ebony Oshunrinde. Yes, I just said that. Ebony Oshunrinde. Okay, Ebony Oshunrinde. She has a Nigerian name. Okay, and more importantly, an Orisha name. Okay, and she is the 16-year-old producer that produced the song entitled Crown, CROWN, on Jay-Z's new project, Magna Carta, The Holy Grail. So significant. There's so much in that right there. But clearly, we're dealing with this concept of the Indigo children. She represents a redeeming of the crown, a redeeming of not only the imagery of the Indigo Child, but also of the status and spiritual privilege of the Indigo Child, being 16 years old and landing a contract and a song like that on a music mogul's project. And of course, she has much more to bring forth. So again, what we're coming into now with the science of the Indigo children, we're coming into an age of redemption. Okay, but more so a redemption of what has been perverted, stolen, and distorted previously through our information and knowledge and through our directed will and effort. So this is a very important time that I want you all to pay attention to. And, we'll get into the Indigo. There's so much more that can be spoken about, but I will be dealing with this more in our new spiritual training. For those of you who have not signed up yet, make sure you head over to saduluhouse.com, saduluhouse.com. Sign up for classes. For those who want readings, you can get the readings there as well. Some have asked me about that, and they've asked me about classes. All the information you need is right there. You can also go to orishareligion.com and find out more information on classes and readings. Keeping an eye out for the spiritual retreats. I'll be doing some traveling soon, and hopefully coming to a town near you. So it's important for those of you who are on the Facebook wall to send out a shout out. Let me know where you reside and where you're at, and maybe we can coordinate something if you'd like to host a class in your area or some group readings in your area as I'm passing through. Okay, so with that, I'm Yuya, Assaaan-ANU. Make sure you pick up a copy of Grasping the Root of Divine Power and Solutions for Dysfunctional Families. And on a side note, keep your children away from that fluoride. Fluoride impedes pineal organ activity because the pineal organ is a fluoride connector. We got into the third eye before. Okay, fluoride is very dangerous to indigo children. Extremely dangerous. All right. So until next time, I'm Yuya, Assaaan-ANU. Be safe. Peace.